Hi, I'm James and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to look at the first official supplement for Twilight 2000, which is Urban Operations. Now, I've pre-ordered it and the nice thing is when you pre-order it, Free League send you the PDFs, just like they did with the boxed game that came out. So it's going to be another boxed set. It's got quite a bit in it. You've got a 96-page book, which we're going to look at in detail. 2 maps for each of the 2 main cities, which we'll look at shortly. 10 modular maps to fit together to build your urban environment. 16 encounter cards. Now the idea behind these is they replace 16 of the ones in the main deck, and very usefully they are marked as urban ops, so you can tell which ones you're taking out, which ones you're putting in, depending on your setting. Or you can just chuck them all in and ignore the ones that aren't relevant. There's 6 interior maps. Now interior maps are slightly different. We'll look at that in a bit when we look at the rules. We've got 2 scenario site maps, which we'll look at when we look at the book, and a set of tokens showing breaches, blocks, which level people are on, things like that. So there's a fair bit going to be in the full box. So let's actually start with the book itself, because that's going to be the big thing. 96 pages, as I said. It's done with very similar artwork and style to the original. Breaks into 6 chapters: playing in cities, city rules, urban encounters, city factions, urban plots, and then scenario sites with 2 appendices, which is Krakow and Karlsburg. So we'll work through it. So the first bit, playing in cities, talks about the state of the world and how a city will be organised in Twilight 2000. It does, to me, move away from a lot of role-playing games. It does have some quite adult themes in there. It talks about the value, of in economics, for example, and it talks about sort of currencies, bullets, cigarettes, valuable metals, favours, sex. There are references like that in there. Some of these scenarios do feature some quite graphic detail, so you perhaps have to consider your group when you're looking at this. So you've got a few pages of that going through it. It's referencing sort of the state of Berlin in 1945, some modern wars, and I think sort of looking at some footage of those would give you a really good idea. Moving into the city rules, the first thing you have are 2 new archetypes, the cop and the criminal. Nice idea to include them. It does add a few new specialities in, which this is something I never like, because they're not featured for original characters, they don't feature in the generation rules, just for new ones, and some of them, like authority and close quarters specialist, really should be available a lot broader. Cryptographer as well, that's one that I think probably should be elsewhere. So we've got then city warfare. It talks about things like the fog of war, hugging walls, using vehicles as cover, blocking hexes, breaching, movement. It basically adds an extra layer of crunchiness to your basic rules, and how to operate inside buildings, which I think works nicely. There's then a section on close quarters combat. Now this is where the close quarter maps come in. Now the idea behind this is they're much larger scale, and they're actually roughly 1 to 125 instead of 1 to 500 like the other maps, so you actually have the detail of the inside of the buildings. It doesn't use hexes, it uses areas, which is a novel thing to see in a game. But I think works quite well, and it sort of advises you when to switch to it and so on. The rules are pretty good. I think you could use them very, very easily to get that effect of close combat in. So yeah, highly recommended. Next thing you have is city travel, because obviously you're not going to be travelling as far as you are outdoors, also out of the cities, and it talks about the different way to modify the rules. That only takes up just over about a page and a half altogether. So there's not a lot of crunchy rules in here, other than really the fighting inside the buildings. That's the biggest difference. We then come into chapter 3, which is looking at encounters. There's advice on how to modify the standard encounters, and a few new NPCs. You've got gang members, street kids and police officers. I'll pick a couple of very quick scenarios. The 8 of Diamonds, Baker Street Irregulars. Faction Civilian, number PC +3. Pack of street kids taking interest in the PCs. If they think they can get away with it, they'll try to lift small items off the characters as they crowd round them. These kids see and hear a lot in the city. It could be useful if the PCs make friends with them. However, they're suspicious, wise beyond their years, causing any persuasion roll against them to have a -2 modifier. On the other hand, if the players give them food or supplies, the roll is instead made with a +2 modifier. And then there's a new section called Plot, and we'll talk more about plots later on. And the detail it gives there is one of the kids works occasionally as the eyes and ears of a DIA agent. He's been asked to listen for anyone mentioning Op Reset or the Last Offensive. So that's an example of one. And we'll have another look at one. Queen of Hearts, Drunks. Faction Civilian, number PCs +3. A group of drunks amble down the street. They're in good spirits, but they turn when they see anybody wearing a uniform. They don't like uniforms. If the PCs can't calm them down, the drunks throw bottles and rocks at them. It could easily escalate. And the plot option, the drunks were victimised by soldiers as part of the last offensive or fled from the plague. So they're the sort of scenarios we've got, and there's 16 of them. Quite nice ones, some nice little illustrations to go with them as well. You've then got a section on stationary encounters, radio chatter, rumours. So you've got 3 new tables, all D10, although some of them do have, like the radio chatter is 1 to 4 is music. There's one thing I picked up on this, which was a numbers station. Now I'm quite interested in number stations, and if you look at my radio chatter supplement I did, I actually brought it in. The problem with a number station is it is impossible to crack them without knowing the key. So I disagree slightly with that. It's very easy to change. You just take out the number station and make it a coded broadcast, so it's very easy to change. We then move on to city factions. Now the city factions are very similar to what you have in the base game, and I'm going to massacre the Russian, I'm afraid. The Vorovskoy Mir, which are basically what's called, translates as Thieves' World. Basically these are gangs, particularly Russian, and you've got page and a half of detail on them, with NPC leaders and so on, how many you'd expect to find in a city. So if you want the organised black market, that's a really good one to look at. The next one's an interesting one, the World Health Organization, and I'm not going to read any of that out at all, go into any depth, because it isn't what you expect with it. There's a lovely little twist with how they've handled it. You've then got the Free Polish 6th Brigade. Now these are the garrison of Krakow, and it goes into the organisation. And then for Sweden you've got the Life Regiment Hussars, which is intended to be linked to Carlsberg. That's obviously brand new. It's quite a nicely detailed one. Then we've got a section on urban plots. Now plots are something new. The idea with these, they are overarching scenarios. So players can become involved in multiple ways. Things will happen if they don't do things. Things will happen if they do things, which is a lovely little touch. So you have a countdown as to what's going on. You have the Spear of Destiny. That's quite an interesting one. It tells you which factions are involved, which is the Shepherd's Flock, the CIA, DIA, KGB and GIU, and which scenario sites come into it, which is the Church. So you've got that one. You've then got Power Play. Now Power Play is all of a sudden power is coming back in certain areas. And again, that builds into what's going on. The Last Offensive. Now the Soviets basically are creating a final push. and that sort of goes into that. The plague, which is like a biological agent that's been released, whether it's man-made or accidental. There's a little bit on that. An election year. Krakow is a bit different from how it was in first edition. It's still a democracy, although democracy for any given value of the term democracy in the year 2000, and that's detailing it there. So that one's specific to Warsaw, and then the next one is specific as well. It's called The Man Who Would Be King, which looks at who could become the new king of Sweden, and the tensions going off around that. And then we have 2 pages on Operation Reset. What's going on with Operation Reset? It doesn't give you a lot. It's going to be revealed over a number of the box sets, but it does give you a few more clues towards what's going on. I think I've got enough of an idea to have a guess, but I don't intend to, because I may well be wrong now, and I would hate to actually spoil it for anybody else anyway, but there's some detail on that. Then we come to the scenario sites. Now the scenario sites are what you'd expect. You've got the big playground. I liked this one. It's in a city. You've got massive housing complex with 2 gangs. It's intended very much, I felt, for Poland, but you could probably modify it to let it work with Sweden. You could even potentially modify it to the UK if you tone down sort of some of the weapons and things. Now this is they're quite long, these. I'm just looking how long they are. We've got a double page map and 2, 4, 6 pages of detail on it, and it's interesting. I think that would be a really good one to put players through. You've then got the church, which has got a 1-page map, and let's have a look. About 5 pages of detail, and the power plant. Now these all tie in to the previous plots as well, so they are quite nice. There's some very nice ideas. The power plant in particular could be moved around quite considerably. And then you've got the bunker. Now the bunker is basically a nightclub, and it sort of has power. It's functioning. Players can actually go and visit it, and I can see that slotting in any city. You've then got the appendices. You've got Krakow. Krakow is obviously a fan favourite. Goes into this current situation in it. There's a quick guide. It's obviously far less than you got in the first edition. The first edition had a lot more, but it was a much thicker book. It's nice to see the Nozdrovia made its mention, although no mention of the staff of it, which I thought was a bit of a shame. They've also changed the helicopter to an Mi-24 Hind, and I think the Hind probably needs a bit of work. The weapons with AGS-17 mounted in gun pods, I've yet to find a reference to that in any sort of literature. I did a good check for it. It may be possible, and I just haven't found it. It does make me consider perhaps we need to look at it slightly differently. The other thing that's worth remembering with the Hind is they don't fly like Western helicopters. They are intended to actually be flown really as aircraft. They don't hover to launch their attacks. They do runs. So it does have the details for it. I think it's reasonably well put together. It probably wants a bit more detail. For example, it misses out the 2 side guns that can be fitted. But Krakow itself is a brilliant little setting. I think there's a lot of potential for gaming there. You could run a whole campaign in Krakow. And then you've got Karlsborg. Now this ties in, as do pretty much all of the scenarios and everything with these. They all tie in together. You can't just pick up a section and read, I don't think. I think you have to have read the whole book, got your idea, done your planning. But Karlsborg is a powder keg. It's all set to go off again. There's a helicopter there as well, that does seem to be a bit of a theme. Lots of NPCs and lots of political intrigue. So what do I think of it? I think it's nice. I think there's a lot of good information in there. I think it's good. Some lovely playable scenarios, new factions. It's not particularly rules heavy, it's more background based, which is what I wanted out of it. And I'm very happy with it. I'm really pleased with my purchase. And I'll probably be adding a few bits and pieces to my items that I've written based around this. Hope that's been useful, and I'll see you soon for another review.